very much. Thank you all for coming, and I want to congratulate Malvern on their 1-year anniversary of presenting book night. It's a great service you're doing for the authors, they're Austin writers, and hopefully for the Austin readers. But we appreciate it, and congratulations, and thanks to all of you for putting this together. As he mentioned, Joe mentioned, this is the third book in this series with a story of Donnie Ray Quinn, who was a history major, graduate student at the University of Texas, living at home with his stepmother and stepfather, who is taken under the wing of a all-American tight end for the university, a very ambitious fellow named Wesley Byrd. And between them they had a lot of adventures, and Wesley managed to talk Donnie into publishing a paper that, based on some research he had done at the State Archives, that set out to show that the Attorney General of Texas, who was running for governor and claimed to be the great-great-grandson of the hero of San Jacinto, was in fact a fraud. And that got him embroiled in enough problems and troubles that he ended up, at the end of the book, leaving and going after his true love, who was a Mexican girl who lawyer studying at the university, and he followed her to Mexico. In the second book, we learn that she has been killed by the drug cartel. He comes home defeated and hopeless, and the first sign he sees as he comes off the airplane at the Bush International Airport in Houston is a sign for a night law school, the Jefferson Davis School of Law in Beaumont. And so he enrolls there, gets a degree, and finds that nobody particularly wants to hire a graduate of the Jefferson Davis. So he does manage to find a job through his former political connections with a lawyer in the town of Velda in the Panhandle. The second book deals with his adventures there with a rancher who gets caught up with the same drug cartel, with an ambitious businessman named Sawbuck's Banjo, who is buying up water rights in the Panhandle, and a nuclear assembly plant in the area which is suspected of leaking radioactive material into the Ogallala water formation, and the largest water supply in the United States. So he has those problems to deal with. He manages to pull that all together, and is reasonably happy practicing law in Velda when he gets a call and he finds out that his old friend Wesley Byrd has convinced his mother and father to invest their life savings in a land deal that he and the former governor of Texas are promoting not far from a large Austin racetrack. So he comes home back to Texas to try to see what he can do to salvage that situation. And so I'll read to you from the chapter where he arrives back in Austin. Don stood in the bright Austin sun waiting for his taxi. The clouds that had menaced the jet were distant shadows off to the west, and any rain in them was headed for somewhere far away. The flower beds in front of the private terminal were graveled with desert shrubs, a reminder to Don that Central Texas was fast becoming Phoenix. Just a little rain, just as little rain, and just as many Californians. Better music though, and Tex-Mex. His stomach growled at the thought of a plate of Pedro's migas. Maybe I'll go back to Pedro's and confront some devils. Where is that taxi? He thought of calling again, what had to be the oldest cab in Austin limped into the drive. It was painted purple with faded gold stripes and a 10-foot plexiglass figure of a bumblebee perched unsteadily on its roof. An aging hippie flipped his cigarette butt out the window. "You call a cab?" Don nodded. "Are you a taxi or an exterminator?" "You want to go? Get in. Otherwise, I've got places I need to be." "I bet," Don thought. He threw his duffel bag into the back seat and climbed after it. He hadn't been in a car that smelled of cigarette smoke and marijuana since he left town. He waited while the driver entered something into the keypad that was Velcroed to the dashboard. When he finished, the driver sat waiting for Don to speak. "Latest technology, huh?" Don said. "Yes, sir." The driver scratched his scrubby beard with nicotine-stained fingers. "Where to?" "The Cartwright house. Do you know where that is?" "Nope." "No GPS?" The driver stared at Dave in the rearview mirror. "Does it look like I have a GPS?" Don dug through his coat pockets and finally found the address. He handed the scrap of paper to the driver. It's on Town Lake." The driver eyed him suspiciously. "Where are you from?" "The Panhandle," Don answered. "Why?" "Damn tea partier, huh?" "Should I just get another cab?" "It's not Town Lake, it's Lady Bird Lake, and if you don't like that, you can just get the hell out of my cab and walk to town." "Incredible," Don said softly. "I didn't mean to insult Mrs. Johnson. I grew up here. It was always Town Lake. That's all." The driver scowled. He read the address and mumbled to himself. $60, he said. "Cash. In advance. I do not take credit cards." "Are you kidding me? $60? I'll give you 25. "You won't get from here to there for less than $60. He turned around in the seat and eyed Don. "How can you live in the Panhandle and not be a tea partier?" "Austin jeans, I guess. Look, Feldman," he said, reading from the driver's ID card. "I'm not on an expense account. I'm on my way to visit my folks. Isn't there some way we can make a deal?" Feldman took out a joint and sniffed it. "You smoke?" "No, I don't, but thanks." Feldman stretched his hairy arms on over his head and yawned. "I've been over at the cabbie lot waiting for a fare for 2 hours. I'm the last indie cabbie in Austin, and right now, and every now and then they throw me a bone just so they can tell the commission I'm competition and keep the other change out." This was written before Uber, by the way. You're my bone." He eyed Don for a second. "I'm ready to go off shift. I really could use a toke." He opened the door and got out of the cab. "You drive." "Off the meter, $25, cash, no card. You drive and I'll smoke." Don smiled, nodded his agreement, and got into the driver's seat, and he sank down so far he couldn't see over the steering wheel. "You're a big man, Feldman. I need a pillow or something." "Oh yeah," the cabbie answered. "I've worn that seat down to nothing. Just a second." He leaned in and pulled the trunk release. Don got a whiff of his unwashed body, mingled with the acrid smell of marijuana and juicy fruit chewing gum. He could hear Feldman as he rummaged in the trunk. He slammed the trunk lid down and reappeared beside the driver's seat holding a cracked plastic cushion. "Get out." Don climbed up out of the cab and watched as the big man fussed with the pillow. "There," Feldman said. "Be sure and adjust the mirrors. The right one's tricky. Just fiddle with it until it catches." He stood by the car until he was sure that Don was buckled in safely.
and he got in the front passenger seat and carefully lit his joint. Don started the car and played with the radio. "Leave that alone," Feldman barked, expelling a lungful of powerful smoke. Don had an idea. "Feldman," he began. The big man had closed his eyes. He ignored him. "Feldman," he said louder. "Just drive, man. Don't talk all the time." "Is it all right if I go by the universe race world?" "Go wherever you want. That magic chariot is yours." Don stared slowly out of the parking lot. Started slowly out of the parking lot. A man walking stiffly in cowboy boots and skinny jeans came from the terminal and waved frantically at them. Feldman sat up. "Look at that fool. He wants a cab ride to town. That'll be a long wait. Probably a Russian millionaire. You can tell him new boots are pinching, can't you? Shouldn't we give him a lift? You could use the fare, right?" "I'll have to drive, and I don't want to drive." That's an important difference between old Austin and new Austin. You should always remember. If I don't want to drive, I don't drive. Those other cabbies, they fight for every fare. I'm a dying breed, cowboy. When I first came here, there were enough people like me to make a difference. Not anymore. That universal race world, we could hardly get 50 people to protest when they handed out the subsidies for that motherfucker. Don shook off the waving Russian, if that's what he was. "Off duty," he yelled. The Russian gave him the finger and went back toward the terminal. "Big subsidies, huh?" "Well, in addition to the county roads out there, county building roads out there and paving everything in sight, putting in sewer and utility service, which incidentally, the people who lived out there had been without for all these same services forever. Besides that, the sovereign state of Texas is giving them sales tax rebates of $40 million a year, and don't even get me started on the subject of sales tax rebates." I hadn't meant to, Don thought. "You're an educated man, Feldman. What are you doing driving a cab?" Feldman inhaled deeply and blew smoke out the open window. "Making my way, making it pay," he said. "Every day I get to meet people and tell them my philosophy of life. I tell foreigners what Austin is really like these days, what it's become, how it's fucked itself. I'm talking about people who ordinarily wouldn't give me the time of day." He laughed. "Once they're in my cab and I lock the door, I've got a captive audience." A captive audience. He lay back in the seat and laughed again. "What's fun is getting some right-wing dingbat in my back seat and telling him the truth. Some of them squirm and fidget and ask how much longer the ride is, and one of them begged me to let him out. They don't tip, but it's worth it." "What did you study at the university? I'm assuming you went to UT. Still do." "Really? What are you, 40 years old?" "A late bloomer." "Oh, hell no, I've been at it for 20 years. I have enough hours for a degree in economics and history and philosophy." "Well, what's a degree anyway? It's just a piece of paper. It's the quest for knowledge, for enlightenment. That's what's important." "Well, isn't there some kind of time limit?" Feldman pulled out an old leather wallet stuffed with clippings and cardboard discount cards. He found a dog-eared card. "My university ID, all that bullshit about in and out in 6 years does not apply to me. I'm grandfathered." So you could be a grandfather. "Hell, I may be." A freshly washed yellow cab pulled up beside them. Don stopped and the driver yelled, "Hey, Feldman, I'm looking for some foreigner needs a ride to town. Have you seen him?" "That would be this man," Feldman said, pointing at Don. "I'm teaching him to drive American style." "Feldman, are you high again? You could lose your license letting somebody drive your cab." Feldman laughed. "You won't say anything, buddy. Maybe at Woodrow's later. I've got some really good African." They watched the other cab make a U-turn out of the parking lot, too soon for the driver to see the Russian hopping out of the terminal barefoot, carrying his lizard cardboard cowboy boots. Don roused Feldman enough from time to time to help him find his way. They drove down newly paved roads, past old farmhouses with poorly tended yards to the racetrack. Folks rent out their front yards on big race day. Capitalist oppression of the poor man. Rich shits from all over the world in their leather suits, leather coats and gold jewelry jetting in and going to the race here. Then to Rio or Monaco or God knows where. All the time, poor old Elmer over there has to scratch out a living, renting out his front yard to poor fools who pay a month's rent money to come here and gawk. It's a fucking crime. That's what it is. It's talk about the 1%. He lit another stubby joint and stared belligerently at Don. Don smiled. "You're not a fan of Universe Race World." "No, I am not. It's not Austin, you know." Don stopped the bumblebee at the entrance to the track, drawing stares from people waiting to go in. Some took photos of the taxi. Feldman ignored them. Don could see the grandstands and the tower. Cars were coming and going. The parking lot was half full. "What's going on here today? Is it a race?" "Oh, there's always something going on. Concerts of some sort, some Nashville shit. They can't be bothered with Austin talent." Feldman fumbled in the glove compartment and came out with a sack of Loopy's donuts. He offered one to Don, who shook his head. "Try one, man. Loopy's been making these things forever. Lots better than that franchise shit they sell all over town." "I know Loopy's. Later, maybe." He watched Feldman devour his second donut and doubted there'd be any left for later. "It's all about land. Land and money," the old hippie complained. "Take Austin city limits. It used to be a regular person, such as myself, could go over to the office and get a ticket, go watch them tape it. Good music, good beer, good weed. Then they moved downtown, sold their name to a developer, got the new space that I've never been inside of and probably never will be. Now it's how much money did you give the goddamn radio station that hoarded itself to the land developers, Austin city limits. It never was supposed to be a money machine, at least not in my book. It's just not right." Feldman folded the empty donut bag neatly and dropped it on the floor. "I recycle," he said. "Every bag gets reused. I take it to Loopy's, and she refills it for me." And I won't tell you what happens after that, but he finds himself embroiled in a dispute about land. He's fought off the drug cartel, he's fought the water developers, he's fought the power industry, but the thing that he finds the hardest to fight are Austin land developers. So that's the story. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Anybody? Jack.
What's the title related to this story?
The title of the book is The Monkey House, and I was at the Paramount with my wife one time a few years ago. It was Carol Burnett or somebody like that was performing down there. And I was talking to a girl who was sitting next to me, a young woman, before the show started, and she said she worked for an animal preserve in Bastrop, MD Anderson Research Center. And she described to me some of the work they did, and in particular the work they did with chimpanzees, which was infecting them with diseases so they could test cures. So they'd give a chimpanzee AIDS or hepatitis or cancer, and then they would try different vaccines. And she described the chimps coming to the cage door with their cups in their hand to get their medication. she described how much she loved those chimps. And yet, that was the work that she was doing. And she said it was worth it because they had done good research and they had found good vaccines. That stuck with me. I noticed then later that there were 2 or 3 instances where chimps escaped from the preserve. One was killed in Bastrop. So when I was writing this book, I moved the chimp preserve to Austin. And I set it on the banks of Lady Bird Lake. And the chimps escaped. And when the chimps escaped, that led to not only a great scene that I enjoyed writing about chimps hanging in the trees in Terrytown and Old Enfield, but also it led to the closure of the primate preserve. And in fact, the National Institutes of Health did ban in the early 2000s research on chimps, saying that it was no longer necessary. There were other ways to test these vaccines. But the chimps that escaped led to the closing of the primate preserve on Lady Bird Lake on a tract of land that's suspiciously like the Breckenridge tract, but it's, in my book, is the Hieronymus tract, and it's up for sale. So the plot then turns to the question of what's going to happen to that tract and other tracts of land in and around Austin. So that's where the title comes from. The monkey house is where the chimps were living before they escaped. They were recaptured. Yes?
So many, whenever we read something, I think it's just automatic that we wonder, it's fiction, but we wonder how much of it the writer based on his own life. And you've got 3 books now in this series. So I have to ask you, how much of this is actually in any way related to your own life?
Well, I was at the university. I was involved in campus politics, and I was involved in a governor's race one time, but it didn't involve the same problems that Donnie faced. There was I was a lawyer in the Panhandle, so I was familiar with that. But the things, Donnie's a much more interesting person than I am. And he's, for one thing, women really like him. And so he has, he's unlucky in love because the one woman that he really loved, she died. But women are attracted to him. He tries his best to return the love, but he always has to do something to drive them away. And that's his nature, that's his tragedy, I think. And so the character himself is someone that that as I've written the books, the character has grown, and he's become someone that I'm very fond of, but he's not me. Yes?
Do you go out and have conversations with people so you could write about them?
I don't, but I do have conversations with people and I write about them. Yeah. But I don't go out searching material, if that's what you mean. I don't. You ask Matt what his favorite writer, and I would just say that I'm really drawn to Larry McMurtry, and I'm drawn to Elmore Leonard. And the reason I like those contemporary writers is because of the dialogue. And to me, and some of it's outrageous, the dialogue is, but if people didn't talk, if those characters didn't talk that way, they should. I mean, they tell so much about the person. And so what I try to do is to find in the dialogue
a description, something that reveals something about the nature of the person, so that I don't have to, I don't have to talk about that. It should come through if I do it well. And it's not something that I claim to do well all the time, but that's my goal.
Well, we got the cab driver.
Yeah.
Well, I've ridden with him, I'm sure. Anything else?
Do you try to overhear people that are talking so you can write about what they're saying?
I'm going to write that down.
I'm interested in the
I
way you listen.
think it's inevitable. If you've got an ear, you write what you hear. Sure, you do. And some of it's pleasant, some of it's not, but you do. And my politicians, I'm very proud of. And this, well, the land developer in this book is a governor who was defeated for re-election because of Donnie, the work he did. He has recruited the All-American as his right-hand man, and together they go out and invest in everything that they can find because the governor wants to be very wealthy. He's not happy with what fate has given him. He wants to be very wealthy, and he wants to run for president, and none of it works. Well, everybody who's lived in Texas very many years knows a governor who had those characteristics. But my guy, my Bob Brazewood, is not John Connolly, and my Wesley Byrd is not Ben Barnes. It's just that the things that they found themselves involved in provide material for the characters that I've created here. So, and it's the same with other characters in my book. There are you draw from those, from what you know. You draw from the people that you've seen and met, and yet it's not them. John Connolly was not a labor lawyer from Beaumont. I mean, let's face it, he was not. So he was not. He's not the same guy. But the fact that he was a powerful man who had a tragic failure, a flaw, is what I found and tried to apply to these guys. So, anyway, thank you again, and thank you very much for your attention.